Welcome to this first edition of the spring semester's Provost Conversations on Teaching and Learning. Today, Shauna is going to engage us in a conversation titled Successfully Facilitating an Online or Hybrid Course. Dr. Pribesh is an associate professor in the Educational Foundations and Leadership Department. She teaches distance courses in many different formats, but she always teaches with the audience in mind. For those of you who have taught online or considering it or taught hybrid, I'm sure you've realized how difficult it is to do that, but she indicates it's just as important to imagine how difficult it is for students to learn in an online environment. And in pointing that out, she recognizes there's ways to get through the apprehension, and I know we're going to hear about the ways to get through that apprehension in the next hour. So please join in this conversation and welcome Dr. Shauna Pribesh.
Thanks for that introduction. Oh, now we can act really bad because the provost isn't here, right? Yes, so let's really get our heckle on, because I know there's plenty of people here who came today just to heckle. Today I want to talk to you about facilitating online and hybrid courses. Having said that, I'm probably not going to say online or hybrid for the rest of the presentation, which leads me to talk to you about my credentials. I have none. Right, exactly. My introduction to distance education went something like this. My chair walks into my assistant professor office and he says, "I need you to teach a course." I said, "Great. I need you to teach a course this semester that starts next week." "Great, okay." "I need you to teach an advanced statistics course that you've never taught before in ANOVA." Fabulous, okay? And then he says, "Oh no, by the way, it's televised, it's distance." And then I burst into tears. That is a true story, because I was terrified not of prepping a course in 1 week, not of taking on advanced statistics, but the televised part. So I went home and thought about it. And I thought, do something scary every single day. So I walked back in and said, I'll take this challenge. And I know I have to take this challenge because I don't have tenure, but I'm just saying that I'm going to take this challenge. And so I've taught distance courses every semester since then. And I still get streaming flop sweat down my body before I go to teach them, much like I'm experiencing right now. So it is scary. In conclusion, today's talk, and then you can leave afterwards after you see this slide, right? Okay, so if you only teach face-to-face and you're forced to be here for some other reason, I challenge you that you are actually still already engaging in distance education. The second point I want you to leave here today with is what David Brooks says, is we are all social animals. And if we just keep that in mind, this makes more sense. And I want us to try close the distance in distance education. And here's Ian Sutherland. I totally stole this from him, this closing the distance, as I am stealing everything in this presentation from other people. There is nothing unique in what I'm going to tell you today. There's nothing that I made up. And so if you would like, you can leave right now, because these are the 3 points that we want to talk about today. Okay, so why do I think we're all engaging in distance education anyway? Well, as soon as we started using Blackboard, now raise your hands, how many of you love Blackboard? Come on, you gotta love it, good. Because if you're not using this learning management system, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And some of you don't teach and don't use it, but it is the bomb in terms of storing all your stuff, and then you just copy it over the next semester. It's also great for communication and collaboration. So it's worth taking the time to learn how to use Blackboard, right? Okay. But back in the olden days, right, we had the telephone form of distance education. So if you're even talking or texting with your students, you're engaging in some sort of distance interaction. And I would argue that even if you are teaching a face-to-face class or going to a meeting like this, that we have a degree of social distance. And it's that distance that we can always serve to strengthen and closen. So we want to be concerned with closing the distance and strengthening those ties in that distance, whether we're in face-to-face, online, or some combination of that. Bam, you guys are teaching distance education. You just didn't know it. Okay, so social animals, we just want to be heard and understood, right? So let's try this. Everybody's got to get on up. Get up, get out of those chairs, get up, get on up. I want you to get into groups of, hey, let's say 4. Groups of 4. Go ahead, get in your little groups. Yep, sorry, you can walk around and do this. Here is your task. You have 20 pieces of white paper, 8.5 by 11 inches normal paper. You must work together to design a paper tower that is freestanding and as high as possible. You get 1 point for every inch high it is. You have 5 minutes to do this. You may not turn around. You may talk to one another, but you may not look at one another. Okay? And your time starts now. You may now look at each other. Great.
We cried.
You cried. Well, good. That's a sign of frustration, and we learn when we're frustrated.
We decided what our group roles were.
Was that the first thing that you did?
We introduced ourselves.
You did. Every single one of you walked over and introduced yourselves. Not only do we have to introduce ourselves to our students, but we need to give them space to introduce themselves to each other. And I do this through a discussion board where we keep it permanently so that it's written and people can go back, oh yeah, who was that person from, Penn State or something like that. Okay, tell me what happened in your groups. What'd you guys do next? Chat.
It seemed like somebody took a lead in terms of actually doing it.
Okay, and when they took a lead, how did that happen? Did they say, I'm a leader? Okay.
No, we just started crumpling and putting it over our back and made it work.
So who wants to be the leader? Who wants to be a crumpler? What other roles did you have? Timekeeper?
Participants, but
Participants.
Our forming, storming, and norming cycle was pretty quick.
Excellent. Are you Odyssey of the Mind or Destination Imagination person? Because that's yep, exactly. Forming, storming, and norming. Right, so forming a group, you can't underestimate the idea of giving people roles, having then assign them, rotating roles. What's that word?
Interaction.
What does it help? What is it?
Interaction.
Interaction and cooperation and communication, right? So we're looking for interaction and interaction with lots of communication. So how was it standing and not being able to look at each other?
It was very difficult.
Why?
You lose a important piece of communication, which is nonverbal communication.
Okay, so you're losing nonverbal communication. So what do you have to rely on if you don't have this nonverbal communication? What do you have to do?
You use the writing to relay thoughts, patterns. You can also use graphics, symbols. All these things add up to effective communication, and that is the key in an online environment.
Right, and what you're mentioning is a lot of different layers of communication where we might get away with in a face-to-face environment saying one sentence. We have to include a lot of details and varied ways of communication, especially in the written communication world. Fran?
I'd say detailed directions, specific, that are easy to follow, yet are very, very understandable.
Right, so I gave you 2 lines worth of instructions, but I had to go around from group to group to remind you, don't look at each other, right, you cheaters. It's got to be a freestanding tower. It was like, oh, it is? Well, I said that once, only once. So my instructions to you were not varied in the fact that I should have made an announcement. I should have given it to you in a written format. I should give it to you on a discussion board. So now we're just talking about communication. That's it. But communication is the key for creating these strong social bonds that we want people in a face-to-face environment or an online environment to have. So we have to strengthen our communication no matter where we are. And we do this so that we can be heard and understood. And we know that students in general feel more isolated and less satisfied with distance courses. And some of this can be due to this isolation that they're allowed to be in, or it could be with our job in communication. Okay? So we want to close the distance. Again, totally stealing this from Ian Sutherland, closing the distance. So this is not rocket science, right? Other people have talked about, in fact, 1989, there's 3 types of interactions that we want to close the distance on. We want to close the distance with the student and the instructor. We want to close the distance with students and students. And we want to close the distance with students and content, right? So you're thinking, well, my job is only to deliver content, so maybe I'll concentrate on that. And that's okay, because other research suggests that you don't have to knock yourself out on all 3 types. You can concentrate on one type more than the other, and it's just as effective. And the most effective one to concentrate on is content. Oh, wait a minute. You're like, I said, come on and give me some ideas. Where's the online versus hybrid discussion here, right? We haven't even talked about this. What is a hybrid? Both what?
Isn't it face-to-face and online? No?
What is it? Face-to-face and online? Could be. What's another definition of hybrid?
Synchronous and asynchronous.
Synchronous and asynchronous. The bottom line is we don't have a good definition of hybrid, right? I'm looking at a technology guy back there and saying like, we don't know what hybrid is. So the good thing is you get to create your own format when it says hybrid. And online can be construed as asynchronous and distance. But that's not necessarily all true. So I said I'm going to give you some tools. Let's go ahead and do that. Closing the distance between you and the instructor. This is where everybody groans. Ugh. They want so much of me, right? But if you're going to communicate with your students, you have to give them access to you. So what are some of the ways that you can give your students access to you? So Adobe Connect or WebEx, there's many different tools out there. ODU just happens to support Adobe Connect, is a virtual conferencing software where you can meet with students. It's very easy for them to use. You set up a meeting and they click on it and boom, they're there. You can use a video camera so you can see them. They can see you, or you don't have to. You can chat with them. You can share documents. So you can set up a synchronous meeting time with them. And that's the most, visual. It's like being in the room with them. But I'm a student. I signed up for an online class, asynchronous. I don't want to go meet with you synchronously, right? What else can I do? Maybe I do, but
Well, my generation would say the telephone, but
right. Well, that's true. What happened to the telephone? Why not just talk with them on the telephone? And so you don't have to do fancy Adobe Connect or Skype or Google Hangout or all those other places. You could just pick up the phone, and now you can text.
however, in today's world, why not set up an Ask the Professor discussion forum that all students can see and all contribute to?
Absolutely. Using Blackboard again on a discussion board, I say, what questions have ye or something. And then even if I talk to a student on Adobe Connect or the telephone or text, that question is going to go up on that discussion board. And chances are students will just visit that first. So like if I have a question and I know that that discussion thread is active, I'll go there first, which gets them off my back, right? What are some other ways that we can close the distance with our students? Yeah.
I think one of the important things is whether you're using bulletin board forums or email or anything, if they believe that they're going to throw their question out into the void and not hear from you for days, that increases that sense of distance and no one's paying attention to me.
Exactly. I want to be heard and understood. So that's where ground rules come into play, is if you have to be very explicit about when and how you will respond to people, and you have to live by them. So I have 2 young children. I don't answer the phone after 9 o'clock, but I do text. And so I'll text between certain hours. I might also say, I'm going to visit this discussion forum every other day and respond to it. I encourage you also to ask your students to create ground rules for you to contact them, because it goes both ways. Is that I text that student and I expected them to get back to me. Where is your assignment? It's late, and they don't respond. So to have them set up their own ground rules. If I ask something of them, then they respond to me. Another really cool tool is just use an audio file or Adobe Connect to offer feedback to students. So you know how when we're grading a paper where it's all micro edits, almost like copy edits, and sometimes the next assignment you find that the student has made those copy edit changes, but they've missed the big picture. So one way to do it is to make an Adobe Connect with your face and voice saying, hey, I really liked how you were able to address the point of, the Sahara Desert. But here are some things that you should think about. What was the political history of the Sahara Desert? I know I'm making this up because I teach research methods and statistics, which would all bore you right now. So, but you make this file, they go to their paper, and then they see you talking to them about the feedback, this Adobe Connect file. Now it's hard to do when you have 300 undergrads, right? So you can make that one recording and link it to everybody. I'm a big believer in mass communication. So having announcements, the deadline's coming up for your next assignment. You're like, oh yeah, Bing, whatever. Make those announcements and make them date sensitive. And then they're released. So you're not every week like, oh, I have to go on and put an announcement on this page. And then you can copy them over and adjust them from semester to semester. And then they're getting this weekly or even bi-weekly reminder of, I'm listening to you. You're not really, you only, right? But I'm fake listening to you, so that they're getting communication and feel connected. Okay, those are just some of the tools. Great, so now closing the distance with each other, they're not talking to you, which can be a good thing, right? So how can we get them to talk with one another?
Force them together to work for a common goal.
That's right. So you can start with a low stakes group activity, and the key thing here is low stakes. Well, what if it's only worth like a point and they just have to do something? Practice assigning roles, practice making a paper tower, something like that, where it's extremely low stakes. Oh my God, this works. Maybe next time we'll get together in our group and we'll talk, okay? So low stakes. What else can we do to put them together?
Just to go along with asking the professor form, you can have a cyber cafe or something like that where the students are in control of questions and answers and give them some ownership to the content or what they're understanding or not understanding and helping each other out.
That's a great thing, to put a forum on, multiple forums actually up. So I do one thing called Daily Musings. And they just want to talk. They want to talk about themselves. So I put Daily Musings about statistics or Daily Musings about dissertation seminar, which is what I'm teaching right now. And the students I have in dissertation seminar are students who have had difficulty completing their dissertation. And I cannot believe the stuff that they are talking about. But they're responding to each other. Oh, I hear you with your mother's death. I hear you with your kids. I mean, just amazing things. I don't even have to respond to them. I don't. They're responding to each other, which takes it off of me, right? But they want to be heard. And they are being heard, but just not by me. So discussion threads. So a peer review forum also, which is different from Daily Musings. Daily Musings is where they're telling you about their cat died. Peer review is where they're actually looking at each other's works, yeah.
What about allowing them to share their work and even share their way of solving things? Maybe not answers on something, but being able to beg, steal, borrow ideas from each other, provide information, feedback about suggestions about how they're doing, how it might be improved, etc. Rather than you have to do your own independent work and you can't talk to anybody about it. But in any way, shape, or form that they can share ideas, understandings, critiques, even assessment of their own work. So, while they're still working on it, and encourage them to do that.
Yep, and put a collaboration area. I also think that when you tell someone, like, you can't talk to each other, you're like, oh, yes, I can. And what are you going to do? I'm in a distance format. So save yourself the trouble and be like, talk to each other. Yeah.
Related to that, if you assign homework, let two of them turn in the homework together. Joint effort.
Yep.
They both get the same grade, and the benefit of it for you is you only have to grade half of the work.
You do, but occasionally you want to make sure that they are assessed separately, so you make sure that one person isn't pulling all the oars. Yeah.
In discussion boards and giving control to students to talk to each other. My concern is sometimes they go on the wrong track, and the problem is sometimes when we learn something, and if it is wrong, it is very difficult to get that out of their heads and direct them in the right direction.
Yeah.
That actually, I'm thinking that puts more responsibility on me and more time that I have to spend on following the discussions and all of that to just make sure that they are not making a mistake and teaching each other the wrong stuff.
Yeah, you definitely have that problem with, crappy input means crappy work, right? So I find, though, that on the whole, if they haven't learned it from you, they're not picking it up 100% from their friend on a discussion board, too. And my other, what I've seen is, especially in statistics, where someone will, oh no, you interpret R squared this way and it's completely wrong. 5 other students tend to jump in. And if it's a safe place for them to do that, then it's okay. They're like, oh, okay, no. Or they usually couch it with like, no, I've read in da-da-da-da resource. Dr. Pribish's lecture says da-da-da-da, whatever. So that's what I've found. But you have to try it. And then if you find that they are going down the sinkhole, maybe it doesn't work for that class. Yeah.
That's so true. I mean, you give them the space for that. And if it's early on and it's a particularly difficult or challenging subject, sometimes they won't in the beginning of the semester come and say, because my rule is we don't go by opinion. So I've got to see where you got it from. So they go to all these journals, books, whatever, and it can't be Wikipedia. And they come back and say no. But at first they don't. So I model that for them early on in the semester. Some way to say, oh, great for jumping into the fray. You may be wrong, but hey, you tried.
Right.
And here's what blah and blah and blah says. And a lot of times I don't say it's what I say. And then I love it. 4, 5, 6 weeks in the semester, they begin to do it for each other. And we all learn. I learn an astounding amount from them because I have new sources now also.
Right, and I put a discussion forum up just called resources, and I challenge them, let's make this the best online class we can, but I can't do that. You guys are out there crawling around in that all day, and so they send me great resources. Yeah.
What I've done a number of courses with graduates, and you're working with 12 to 15 students. And then you get an undergraduate class that has 30. So if you allow them time, space, activities to practice the concepts, the objectives, the things that you've thrown out that they're working on, and then put yourself into various, parts along the way where you are assessing. So if they get off track, you have them do something for you and turn it in, then you can remediate, then you can catch them in the act and try to adjust that behavior. It doesn't, having to unlearn and relearn and all that, it definitely is not a, situation you want to get them into, but that works if you're dealing with a lot of students, because you just get, slammed if you're you're the only one assessing, not using peer assessment and that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay, closing the distance with content. Anderson suggests that you can not go crazy with all three, but Bernard et al. Says the one closing the distance with the content is actually the most important thing to do. So this is where I go on the Center for Learning and Teaching commercial, right? Because they're fabulous. They're fabulous. And if you went to another university, you would not have this. Or you might have some poor attempt at it. So use them. They have an amazing summer institute, 2 days in May. I cannot tell you how much I learned. All the stuff that I just talked about today, yeah, I learned it all right there. They also have a Strategies for Teaching Online, which is a 6-week online course. So they have this 6-week course, but it was invaluable for me, and I know for you, to take it as a student and see what it was like to be in a distance environment as a student. And I have to say, no offense, some parts I did not like, right? I didn't like the feeling of I was sitting at a desk being pulled in multiple directions. I needed to be focusing, and I wasn't good at that. So learning to deliver instruction in an environment where your students are constantly being pulled because they're not in a room with you, tough. It's like I'm just going to have to trust that they can go get the content in a meaningful way. They have workshops and they have instructional designers that can help you with online courses, so they know all this other stuff. The other thing I found is that as a student myself, they want video. And there's tons of video. They want pictures. All the things I didn't do for you today, like I didn't give you any pictures, any video. This is super boring, right? They want video, but it can't be more than 5 minutes. Or they're, no way, I'm not sitting still for that. No, did you just load a 20-minute one up there?
Functions and formulas and such, absolutely. How to do something, it should be less than 5 minutes. We're talking broad topics, policy, research in a broad way. So issues have to come to the table. So I think it's for functions and learning how to A plus B and those sort of things, absolutely 5 minutes or less.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. Because mine is very video heavy, tremendously. And when I first started the course, I don't remember who came over to my office to train me because I wanted to get started right away, so I wasn't going to wait until, my time came up. And they said, well, you got to keep your videos short. And I said, no, I teach hour, 15-minute classes. That's what I'm going to do in my videos. Well, as I did them, I changed and I did shorter and shorter, but my videos run from 3 minutes up to about 20 minutes. But it was very interesting because when I gave my first exam, I had a group here on campus that were in the online course, and I was proctoring the exam. So I asked them afterwards, what do you like most? What's working so far? What's not working? And the first thing they said is the short videos are really, the shorter the better. And I didn't believe it when I was told that originally, but my hat off to CLT because I was wrong, and you guys are really right on that one. But one more point about the 5 minutes or less. What I have found is that's great, except if you have a concept that takes a little bit longer than that, and if you chop it into 2 videos, they lose the first part before they get to the next video. So there are times when you have to go longer than the 5 minutes to get the concept, and they're better off with a longer video in that case.
But think how you can keep them short, okay? So, fabulous. We have 10 minutes left. I'd love to hear your ideas about how you think we can close the distance in some ways that we haven't talked about already.
One thing I would point out is when you're looking at your internal communication inside your course, I've never found one size that fit all. I usually have a help forum, a class help forum, whatever you want to call it. It's open all the time. It's available. Some classes will slam it. Others won't put anything in there. A lot of times, everything that's sent to me is sent to me via email, given my rules in the class. And if it's something that I think will help the class, I'll post it in the help forum.
Absolutely.
But, and then there's messages and all that kind of thing in Blackboard. Those you have to be careful with because you may end up getting messages, and if you never check it, you're in trouble. But keeping a number of different, Google Plus, whatever, your class is comfortable with. I would open those up, and then the timeliness and make sure that you check whatever you've said you would communicate with them with.
And I think that's a really good point, that pick the tools that you're comfortable with and only pick like 3 tools.
What have you seen that you've done right when you reflect back, and the common points are the things you're presenting today, those common points that have improved or shown greater or higher results on your student evaluations?
Well, what I find in the qualitative comments is that they really like to talk with one another, and they'll blow it out in some courses, where when I started teaching in a distance environment, it never occurred to me to think about closing the distance between these. And so I didn't provide those forums. I was in control. Locked down, right? And the more I loosen control, the more they seem to enjoy it. I used to be like, oh no, we're sticking to this content. No, you want to bring in somebody else's viewpoint on, chi-square? Great, but you have to be able to explain it to everybody. So opening it up, letting them talk is something I had to grow into. When the first time I had to do a distance class again with 1 week, which we all have to do, I didn't sit down and say like, there's 3 times of connections and how am I going to strengthen them? No, I was like, dear God, let me stay 1 page ahead. Yeah, Steve.
Y'all probably going to think I'm crazy, but one of the things I did when I started, this will be my 3rd semester of teaching online. And the first semester I had these scheduled office hours. They're on this date, this time. If you're going to attend, you have to send me an email so I know someone's going to be there. Nobody ever emailed, right? So what I started doing, and my classes are small. When they get big, I may change my mind in this, but I've gone to what I tell my students are office hours on demand. That means if any student emails me and says, I would like to go on Adobe Connect to discuss this, then I email out to the class. I say, okay, we're all going to have an office hour at this time, and then anyone who wants to join in with that student can, and we have a discussion. So that way it stays asynchronous too. You're not specifying the time when they have to do it. You're allowing the student to pick the time when they want to do it.
I think that's great.
I don't know if that facilitates their learning. Okay.
Well, that's interesting, and linking that interaction to student achievement has been very difficult.
Right. Well, and it seems to me that the problem is that when you have students interacting and dialoguing, sharing homework, participating in discussions, that you need to add some sort of structure to that. In other words, if they're going to be learning about something, inserting kinds of questions that they should address in their discussions, that kind of thing. So I think I wonder, just doing this kind of thing is one thing, but to facilitate their learning, the degree to which you have to kind of think about, well, what do I need to have them kind of deal with as they're doing this kind of interaction, so it doesn't get just about like a sharing of personal experiences, which is fine and nice, but I'm not sure whether that leads to them learning more.
So on voice threads, what we do is embed questions that are content related. So they could be very simplistic, like I put a bunch of numbers up. What are the mean of these numbers? Okay, so everybody has to solve something. But we also ask more, involved questions, like, what would be the impact of a change in finance on this policy? And people write long, thoughtful responses that are linked to the content.
You've taught the course before probably many times, and you have a feel of what the questions are. So when you do a discussion topic, you put your first question up there, and then you come in the middle of the week, say it's a 7-day section, and you come in the middle of the week and you start reading their reflections, but you always hold a question back, and then you further the dialogue and say, oh, well, these are great comments, but have you thought of? And then you throw another question in there and then get them engaged again. So you don't want them just post and then never come back. So it just keeps them engaged with the content.
I love
that
that
doesn't
idea.
answer your question about how much learning is going on, but you are, it'd be the same thing when you're standing in front of them, when you hear their discussions, and then they're like, okay, you haven't addressed this issue, so what about this? And so it just throws something else out.
That's a great idea.
I am in control, and I tell them this is not a correspondence course. Because it's online doesn't mean it's willy-nilly and you can do whatever. It's very structured. and I'm going to lead you from teaching learning theory. I'm going to progressively teach you concepts until we get to what the formative outcome is. And so we don't go, yes, and you can talk in the cyber cafe about whatever, but it's got to be. And so when you said that, what made me think about it is I was not a proponent of these kind of educational methods when I got to ODU. And I had taken a one-year course in distance learning methods and got a certificate in it and filed it away. I was the queen of seminar. I was never going to do anything else. However, 1 year or a year and a half into my tenure here, I teach how to teach. And the comprehensive exam was on distance education methods, and the literature that told how much better students learn if you do it correctly than in a passive lecture form and those sort of things. That's all you had to do is show me the science and the evidence.
You know, I listen to all these different techniques to get students to interact together and all of that, but they only have so much time. So, you know, it would be interesting to have a forum where we could talk about what really works the best, and with the limited amount of time, what should you pick as your tools to make it the best course that you could make it. So that's a challenge I find with the student group that I have, the undergraduates.
Right. I mean, I picked VoiceThread and discussion boards because that's what I found, the research that I could find was the most effective. But then again, I am a newbie in this area, so you guys can probably, but so far you haven't pointed me to a different product or created one. Yeah, but I think that would be very helpful. Jack's always got to get the last word. Jack and I work together, so he can't stand it if I walk out here with the last word.
I was doing an online class and built in a wiki board,
Yep.
you know, discussion part of it, and then I also my face-to-face class said, well, can I have the access to why don't you give us the Blackboard stuff too?
Yes.
And then they access that. And then I asked them about wiki discussions, and I polled the class, and most of them did not want to do it. Okay. So, you know, like requiring people to participate in some of this, I'm not always sure that they really want to do that. They're busy, and unless they can see that that interaction, discussion, et cetera, is going to lead them to do better in the course, and it's just they have to spend time doing something that they don't see the benefit of, I don't think they're going to buy into it.
Well, I
Which
agree
also
with
thinks
that.
like prompting them, you know, kind of trying to help them understand how at least even thinking about interacting with this stuff is likely to help them do better, even
But
though
they
it's
have
not
to
graded.
interact with the content.
Huh?
They have to interact with the content. So VoiceThreads is a content-based delivery.
Right, yeah, but I'm
so,
just
but
saying
the
it's like-
discussion boards, again, should be low stakes, if not no stakes. Because you can't force someone, unless that's your only method of getting participation.
But I'm not sure all students want it, and I'm not so sure that all students need it. And
Yep.
I think the flexibility of doing it and then considering helping them make a connection between if they participate, it's going to help them do better, or
Yeah.
things to think about, you know.
Yep. And in conclusion, in introduction, I do want to thank everybody who has given me tools here today and great opportunities, and a great shout out for Ian Sutherland, who gave me the phrase closing the distance, even though he didn't know he gave it to me. That's what we call stealing. Yes, thank you, Ian. And thank you all for coming today.